Here's a question for you that was posed. There's two questions, and I'll let you pick which one you want to answer because neither one of them were live calls, but they were questions that I found through messaging and things like that. One of them was we did discuss at some point, probably a year and a half ago or so. There's supposedly other records of earlier writings in the Bible where it documents a flood under a different name, not Noah. So does that have any way of disproving the Bible, or is that more, if anything else, more just confirms that the actual flood existed, but the claim is that the story was hijacked?
That's a great question. I hear it all the time, and I confess that I'm baffled. First, let's state the fact. The fact is that not in every culture, but in almost every record of almost every culture, not every, but almost, we find a description of a flood, a deluge, and they're strikingly similar to what we find in Torah. They're not exactly identical, but they're describing it as history, as a historical events. We have texts that date back 2,700 years old. We just find this all over the world. Now, the question is, would that be something, because of these stories are very similar? There's a family, they're on a boat, they're saved from the deluge, and everyone else perishes. Now, think for a moment. Think. If the worldwide flood, as described in the Torah, was a historical event that occurred more than well over 4,000 years ago, if it was, and there are only 8 people who survived that flood, and we are all descendants of those who were on that ship, what would we expect to find in the little literature that survives? And conversely, if there never was a flood, and the story is complete mythology, Torah made it up, what should we expect to discover? Okay. So if there was a worldwide event, and that every single person on Earth is a descendant of the survivors on that ship, we would expect that every culture would... Now, granted, there is very little that we have from the early Bronze Period. There's almost nothing. There's a dearth of information. Almost everything's lost. We know that. But what we would expect is, take an event like 9/11, which wasn't a worldwide event, but in a sense it was, because everyone witnessed it. When I say witnessed it, they saw it on TV, right? We'd expect that every country in the world, in their history books, if I went to Malaysia, if I went to Egypt, if I went to France, in every history book there would be a discussion of 9/11. Now, it's possible that in Egypt they might say things about 9/11 that are inconsistent with the actual history, or that are not consistent with what Americans are learning about 9/11. For whatever reason, it's not relevant. And you could figure out why. You might have a different spin on it. But the fact that this happened, you would expect that everyone would be talking about it, because it was we're going to call it a worldwide event. I'm just taking that because I presumably all the viewers of this show remember 9/11 and know exactly where you were. Strangely, I was supposed to be on a flight that day out of Newark. But the key point is that the fact that we find a description of a worldwide flood, and that a family were saved from this flood, but the animals who they saved, is found in almost every culture, because it happened. Granted that in the textbooks in North Korea, it might be presented differently. Granted, in Libyan textbooks, it might be presented differently. But this basic story, the basic outline is there. Planes are flying into a building. Two giant buildings and they collapse and thousands of people are killed. So therefore, there are things I just don't get. That is what we find. There's all over the world, there's nothing older than 4,500 years old. That means we don't have any written record that's older than the event. That would be a problem. We have nothing like that. So everything is after the event described in the Torah. And they're all describing the same thing, and of course they're getting some key points wrong because these are not divinely inspired works, and whatever, people had spins and so on. And as you play the game telephone, that's what happens. The Torah was preserved because Hashem gave us the Torah, and it had to be preserved. If Hashem didn't preserve the Torah, we wouldn't know what God wants from us. So of course He did that, and we have that Torah. So therefore, the fact that we see a description of a flood, whether it's Syrian texts that are 2,700 years old or other texts everywhere, is precisely what we would expect to find if it was a historical event. If it never happened, and my great-great-grandparents, going back 3,000 years ago, invented the story, then we would only find it in Torah, and no one else would be talking about it because it never happened. Right? So it's really like 9/11. Of course, there are details differently, and who did it, and were the Jews behind it, or the Jews flew the planes, and it really... Yes, you'll have those kind of variances. It's deliberate or otherwise, but the basic gist of the story is you're going to find in literature in every single country in the world, because the whole world knew about it. It happened that horrible early Tuesday morning. People go, oh, but we find it in this story, in Gilgamesh, and so on. And I'm going, well, that points to the fact that they're all describing an event. This wasn't like a conspiracy. The Jews sat down with them, and we all conspired to make this up. So the fact that we find a description of a worldwide flood and a family that survives on a ship, described in so many cultures in the world, that points to the fact that they're all describing a very real event, we are all descendants of them. And the game telephone is played. We have a Torah that gives us the details directly from God. Of course, if a person has his faith in the Torah, they believe that. It's fine. But why is this the problem? This is not a problem. This supports the fact that this worldwide flood is a historical event. I can't understand how intelligent people mess this up. It just blows my mind.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נעשה בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה